The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Kensington Palace as Catherine, Princess of Wales, sat at her mahogany desk, carefully reviewing the latest protocol amendments that had arrived with her morning correspondence. The thick, cream-colored envelope bearing the royal seal had been delivered with unusual urgency, and as she read through the meticulously typed pages, a subtle frown creased her brow. For nearly 15 years, Catherine had navigated the complex world of royal protocol with grace and determination. From the moment she stepped into the spotlight as Prince William's girlfriend at university, she had learned to adapt, to bend without breaking, to smile when cameras flashed, and maintain composure when the weight of expectation threatened to overwhelm her. But this morning felt different. The changes outlined in the document represented more than mere adjustments to ceremony or procedure. They signaled a fundamental shift in how the monarchy would operate in the modern era. Catherine rose from her chair and walked to the window, her silk morning dress rustling softly against her legs. Below, the palace gardens stretched out in perfectly manicured symmetry, a reflection of the order and tradition that had governed royal life for centuries. She watched as gardeners tended to the rose beds, their movements deliberate and practiced, much like her own had become over the years. Every gesture, every word, every public appearance had been carefully choreographed to maintain the delicate balance between accessibility and mystique that the modern monarchy required. The first significant change that caught her attention was the restriction on spontaneous public interactions. Gone were the days when she could stop her car to speak with well-wishers who gathered outside school gates or pause during official walkabouts to engage in extended conversations with members of the public. The new guidelines stipulated that all public interactions must be prearranged and supervised, with security personnel maintaining a minimum distance of 6 feet at all times. Catherine remembered the warmth in people's eyes when she had knelt down to speak with children, the genuine smiles of elderly citizens who simply wanted to shake her hand and share a moment of connection. These spontaneous encounters had always been among her favorite aspects of royal duty, providing her with glimpses into the real lives of the people she served. As she continued reading, Catherine discovered that her philanthropic activities would also face new restrictions. The causes she had championed with passion, mental health awareness, early childhood development, and support for military families, would now require extensive vetting and approval processes. Every speech, every charity visit, every fundraising event would need to align with a centralized royal agenda designed to minimize controversy and maintain political neutrality. While Catherine understood the reasoning behind these measures, she couldn't help but feel a sense of loss. Her work with Place 2B, her advocacy for children's mental health, and her collaboration with military charities have been deeply personal endeavors that allowed her to make a meaningful difference in people's lives. The telephone rang, interrupting her thoughts. It was her private secretary, informing her that a meeting had been scheduled for that afternoon to discuss the implementation of the new protocols. Catherine thanked her secretary and returned to the document, her tea growing cold on the desk beside her. The pages seemed to multiply as she read, each section outlining another aspect of royal life that would be subject to new rules and limitations. One particularly challenging change involved her relationship with the media. While the royal family had always maintained a carefully managed relationship with the press, the new protocols would require all media interactions to be conducted through official channels, with no exceptions for informal encounters or off-the-record conversations. Catherine had developed positive relationships with several journalists over the years, finding that honest communication often led to more accurate and respectful coverage. The ability to provide context or clarification when needed had been invaluable in maintaining her public image and protecting her family's privacy. Now, even these limited interactions would be forbidden. Catherine thought about her children, Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis, and how these changes would affect their lives. The new protocols extended to family activities as well, with stricter guidelines about where the royal children could attend school, which friends they could invite to play dates, and how they could spend their leisure time. Every aspect of their upbringing would be subject to security assessments and protocol reviews. As a mother, Catherine had always tried to provide her children with as normal a childhood as possible within the constraints of their royal status. She had fought to ensure they could attend regular schools, participate in sports teams, and form genuine friendships with their classmates. The new restrictions threatened to create an even greater barrier between her children and the outside world. The protocol changes also address Catherine's personal interests and hobbies. Her love of photography, which had become a signature aspect of her public persona, would now be subject to official oversight. The candid family portraits she had taken and shared with the public, images that had humanized the royal family and created genuine connections with people around the world, would require approval from the royal communications team before release. Even her private photography would need to be cleared if there was any possibility it might be seen by others or accidentally shared. Her passion for sports and outdoor activities faced similar restrictions. The new protocols limited her participation in public sporting events, charity runs, and outdoor adventures that might pose security risks or create unpredictable public situations. Catherine remembered the joy she had felt while participating in a dragon boat race for charity, the sense of freedom and normalcy that came from competing alongside ordinary citizens for a common cause. These moments of authentic engagement had allowed her to connect with people in ways that formal ceremonies never could. As the morning progressed, Catherine found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her to this moment. She thought about the young woman she had been at university, carefree and anonymous, able to walk through St. Andrews without causing a stir or requiring security escorts. She remembered the gradual transition into royal life, the small sacrifices she had made along the way, each one seeming insignificant at the time, but collectively representing a fundamental transformation of her identity. The engagement announcement had marked the beginning of her formal introduction to protocol and procedure. She had embraced the education process with enthusiasm, understanding that her role would require sacrifice and dedication. The wedding preparations had been her first real immersion into the complexities of royal ceremony, where every detail carried historical significance and symbolic meaning. She had learned to appreciate the weight of tradition while finding ways to incorporate her own personality and values into her royal duties. The birth of her children had brought new challenges and considerations. Balancing her desire to be a hands-on mother with the demands of royal duty required constant negotiation and compromise. She had fought to establish boundaries that protected her family's privacy while still fulfilling her public obligations. The new protocols threatened to upset this delicate balance, potentially limiting her ability to be the kind of mother she had always envisioned becoming. Catherine walked to her private sitting room, where photographs of family memories lined the mantelpiece. Images of birthday parties, holiday celebrations, and quiet family moments served as reminders of what mattered most to her. She picked up a photo from the previous summer showing her children playing in the garden, their faces bright with laughter and completely unaware of the formal constraints that governed their daily lives. As their mother, Catherine had worked tirelessly to preserve these moments of normalcy, to ensure that George, Charlotte, and Louis could experience childhood joy despite the unique circumstances of their birth. The afternoon meeting loomed ahead, and Catherine knew she would need to present her thoughts and concerns about the new protocols with diplomacy and grace. She had learned over the years that direct confrontation rarely yielded positive results within the royal system, but she also understood that her voice carried weight and influence. Her perspective as a mother, as a woman who had entered the royal family from the outside, and as someone who had spent years building genuine relationships with the British public, provided valuable insights that could help shape the implementation of these changes. She began to formulate her approach, considering which battles were worth fighting and which compromises she could accept. The spontaneous public interactions that had defined so much of her royal work seemed unlikely to be restored, but Perhaps modifications could be made to allow for more meaningful engagement within structured settings. Her philanthropic activities might require additional oversight, but she could work with the royal communications team to ensure her passions and expertise remain central to her charitable work. As lunch approached, Catherine realized that this moment represented more than just another adaptation to royal protocol. It was a turning point that would define the next phase of her royal career and potentially influence the future of the monarchy itself. The changes being implemented reflected broader shifts in society, technology, and security concerns that could not be ignored. Her challenge would be finding ways to maintain the human connection and authentic engagement that had become her trademark while operating within increasingly restrictive parameters. The weight of responsibility felt particularly heavy that morning, not just for her own future, but for the example she would set for her children and the precedent she would establish for future generations of royals. Catherine understood that her response to these changes would be closely watched and analyzed, both within the palace walls and by the public she served. The grace and wisdom she demonstrated in navigating this transition would become part of her legacy and influence how the monarchy evolved to meet the challenges of the modern world. Looking out at the gardens, once more, Catherine felt a renewed sense of purpose. While the new protocols would require significant adjustments to her approach, they would not diminish her commitment to service or her dedication to the causes she believed in. The challenge would be finding creative ways to maintain meaningful connections with the public while operating within the new constraints. Perhaps these limitations would force innovation, leading to new forms of engagement that could prove even more effective than traditional approaches. The story of Princess Catherine was entering a new chapter, one that would test her resilience, creativity, and commitment to the values that had guided her throughout her royal journey. As she prepared for the afternoon's discussions, she carried with her the hopes and expectations of millions of people who looked to the royal family for inspiration, leadership, and connection to something greater than themselves. The protocols might change, but her fundamental dedication to service would remain unwavering, even as she learned to express it in new and different ways. The afternoon meeting convened in the blue drawing room, its ornate walls bearing witness to countless royal discussions that had shaped the monarchy over generations. Catherine entered the room with measured steps, her navy blue dress chosen deliberately to convey both authority and respect for the gravity of the situation. Around the polished mahogany table sat the key figures who would help implement the new protocol changes. The private secretary to the Prince and Princess of Wales, the communications secretary, the equerry, and several senior palace officials whose faces reflected the same mixture of determination and concern that Catherine felt. Sir Edmund Hartwell, the principal private secretary, opened the meeting with a comprehensive overview of the security assessments that had prompted the protocol revisions. Recent global events had heightened concerns about royal safety, while social media had created unprecedented challenges for managing public engagement and maintaining privacy. Catherine listened intently as he explained how crowd dynamics had changed in the digital age, with spontaneous gatherings often amplified through online platforms to create situations that traditional security measures could not adequately address. The first area of discussion focused on Catherine's public walkabouts, which had become a signature element of her royal style. Previously, she had been able to move through crowds with relative freedom, stopping to accept flowers from children, listening to concerns from elderly citizens, and engaging in conversations that often lasted several minutes. The new protocols would require her to maintain predetermined routes with designated stopping points, limiting interactions to brief exchanges with pre-selected members of the public. Each person she spoke with would need to be identified in advance and undergo basic security screening. Catherine expressed her understanding of the security concerns while articulating her worry about losing the authentic connections that made her public appearances meaningful. She described recent encounters that had particularly touched her heart. A young girl who had shared her dreams of becoming a teacher, an elderly veteran who had simply wanted to thank her for her support of military families, a mother who had found courage to seek help for her child's mental health struggles after hearing Catherine speak about the importance of early intervention. The communications secretary, Margaret Whitfield, presented data showing that Catherine's spontaneous interactions had generated significant positive media coverage and public approval ratings. However, she also outlined the risks associated with uncontrolled encounters, including the possibility of being drawn into controversial conversations or situations that could be manipulated by individuals with ulterior motives. The digital age had created new vulnerabilities, with every interaction potentially being recorded and shared across social media platforms within seconds. As the discussion progressed, Catherine learned about the specific changes that would affect her charitable work. Her patronages, which she had carefully selected based on her personal interests and expertise, would now be subject to annual reviews to ensure they aligned with broader royal strategy. New charitable partnerships would require extensive evaluation processes that could take months to complete, potentially limiting her ability to respond quickly to emerging social issues or crisis situations. The restriction that troubled Catherine most was the limitation on her ability to visit charitable organizations unannounced. Some of her most meaningful experiences had occurred during impromptu visits to hospitals, schools, and community centers, where she could observe programs in their natural state and have genuine conversations with staff and beneficiaries. These unscripted encounters had provided her with valuable insights that informed her advocacy work and helped her understand the real-world impact of the causes she supported. Catherine shared a particular memory from the previous year when she had made an unexpected visit to a children's hospice after hearing about a young patient who had been following her charitable work. The joy on the child's face, the tears of gratitude from the parents, and the meaningful conversation she had with the medical staff had reinforced her commitment to her role and provided her with a deeper understanding of the challenges facing families in crisis. Under the new protocols, such visits would be impossible without weeks of advanced planning and formal arrangements that might diminish their emotional impact. The meeting then addressed changes to Catherine's media interactions, particularly regarding photography. Her personal passion for photography had become one of the most beloved aspects of her public persona, with her portrait sessions featuring her children generating worldwide admiration and setting new standards for royal family imagery. The informal, natural style of these photographs had helped modernize the monarchy's image and created a sense of intimacy between the royal family and the public. Under the new guidelines, all photographs released by Catherine would need to be reviewed by the Royal Communications team before publication. This included not only official portraits, but also the candid family images she had traditionally shared to mark special occasions and milestones. The review process would evaluate technical quality, appropriateness of content, timing of release, and potential security implications. While Catherine understood the reasoning behind this oversight, she worried about losing the spontaneous, authentic quality that had made her photography so appealing. The discussion revealed that Catherine's social media presence would also face new restrictions. Her personal Instagram account, which she had used to share insights into her charitable work and family life, will be merged with the official Prince and Princess of Wales account, with all content managed by the communications team. The personal voice and perspective that had characterized her social media posts would be replaced by a more formal, institutional approach designed to maintain consistency with overall royal messaging. Catherine raised concerns about the impact these changes would have on her children's lives and their preparation for their future royal roles. The new protocols extended to family activities, with stricter guidelines about their public appearances and interactions with other children. School events, sports competitions, and social gatherings would all require security assessments and formal approval processes. She worried that these restrictions would further isolate her children from normal childhood experiences and make it even more difficult for them to develop genuine friendships and understand the world beyond palace walls. Sir Edmund acknowledged Catherine's concerns while emphasizing the non-negotiable nature of certain security requirements. Recent intelligence reports had identified specific threats that necessitated enhanced protection measures, particularly for high-profile members of the royal family. The balance between accessibility and security had shifted permanently, requiring adaptations that might feel restrictive but were essential for ensuring the safety of the royal family and the stability of the institution. As the afternoon wore on, Catherine began to understand the broader context driving these changes. The monarchy was facing unprecedented challenges in maintaining its relevance and connection with the public while operating in an increasingly complex global environment. Social media had democratized communication, but also created new vulnerabilities and expectations. The public's appetite for authentic, personal content had to be balanced against privacy concerns and security requirements that were more sophisticated than ever before. Margaret Whitfield presented research showing how other royal families and public figures had adapted to similar challenges, implementing protocols that maintained engagement while providing adequate protection. The Swedish royal family had pioneered certain approaches to controlled public interaction, while the Dutch monarchy had developed innovative ways to maintain charitable connections within security constraints. These examples provided potential model for Catherine to consider as she adapted her own approach to royal duty. The conversation turned to potential solutions and compromises that might address Catherine's concerns while satisfying security requirements. Could designated interaction zones be created during public events that would allow for meaningful exchanges while maintaining appropriate safety measures? Might charitable visits be conducted in smaller, more controlled settings that would preserve the personal connection Catherine valued while meeting security standards? Could photography reviews be expedited for certain types of family content to maintain the spontaneous feel that had made her images so popular? Catherine found herself thinking about the evolution of royal duty throughout history. Each generation of royals had faced unique challenges that required adaptation and innovation. Her own entry into the royal family had coincided with the rise of social media and 24-hour news coverage, forcing the monarchy to develop new strategies for managing public engagement. The current protocol changes represented another adaptation to changing circumstances, requiring her to find new ways to fulfill her core mission of service and connection. The meeting also addressed practical considerations about implementation timelines and transition periods. Some changes would take effect immediately, particularly those related to security procedures and media interactions. Others would be phased in gradually to allow time for adjustment and refinement. Catherine would work with her staff to develop new approaches to public engagement that respected the protocol constraints while maximizing opportunities for meaningful connection with the causes and communities she served. As the formal meeting concluded, Catherine requested time to discuss the implications privately with her immediate team. She needed to process the full scope of the changes and develop strategies for maintaining her effectiveness as a royal patron and advocate within the new parameters. The challenge would be communicating these changes to her charitable partners and the public in a way that emphasized continuity of purpose rather than limitation of access. Walking back to her private apartments, Catherine reflected on the conversation and its implications for her future role. The protocols represented a significant shift, but they did not diminish her fundamental commitment to service. The challenge would be finding creative ways to maintain meaningful engagement while operating within new constraints. Perhaps these limitations would force innovation, leading to new forms of connection that could prove even more effective than traditional approaches. The evening ahead would be spent in quiet reflection and planning as Catherine began to envision how she would adapt her approach while remaining true to the values and passions that had defined her royal career. The story of her service was entering a new chapter, one that would require all of her grace, intelligence, and creativity to navigate successfully. The protocols might change the methods, but they would never change the heart that drove her commitment to making a positive difference in the lives of others. 3 weeks had passed since the protocol changes were officially implemented, and Catherine found herself navigating a transformed landscape of royal duty that challenged everything she had learned about connecting with the public. The morning began with her first official engagement under the new guidelines, a visit to a children's mental health facility that had been planned for months, but now required extensive security briefings and predetermined interaction schedules that felt foreign and constraining. Standing in her dressing room at Kensington Palace, Catherine studied her reflection while her lady-in-waiting helped adjust the details of her carefully chosen outfit. Every element had been selected not just for appropriateness and style, but now also for its psychological impact on both the children she would meet and the media coverage that would follow. The spontaneous wardrobe choices that had once allowed her to express personality and connect with her audiences were now subject to a committee review process that considered political implications, cultural sensitivities, and security requirements she had never previously contemplated. The car journey to the facility provided time for final briefings about the family she would meet. Previously, Catherine had preferred to learn about people organically during conversations, allowing genuine curiosity and empathy to guide her interactions. Now she carried detailed background information about each person she would speak with, complete with suggested conversation topics and time limits that felt mechanical and artificial. The spontaneous moments of human connection that had always energized her royal work seemed impossible to achieve within such structured parameters. Upon arrival at the mental health facility, Catherine immediately noticed the increased security presence that created an invisible but palpable barrier between her and the staff and family she had come to meet. The warm, welcoming atmosphere she had hoped to create felt strained under the weight of protocol requirements that positioned security officers at regular intervals and established clear boundaries that could not be crossed. Children who might once have approached her with drawings or questions now remained at prescribed distances, their natural curiosity constrained by rules they couldn't understand. During the facility tour, Catherine encountered Dr. Sarah Matthews, a child psychologist whose innovative therapy programs had inspired Catherine's advocacy for early intervention in mental health care. In previous visits to similar organizations, Catherine would have spent considerable time discussing treatment approaches, learning about challenges, and understanding how royal support could make a meaningful difference. The new time constraints allowed for only a brief, formal exchange that barely scratched the surface of the important work being done at the facility. The most emotionally challenging moment came when Catherine was introduced to Emma, an 8-year-old girl whose family had specifically requested to meet the princess after following her mental health advocacy. Emma had prepared a small drawing depicting her journey through therapy, eager to share her story and express gratitude for Catherine's work in reducing stigma around children's mental health. The predetermined schedule allowed for only a 2-minute interaction, leaving both Catherine and Emma with a sense of incompleteness that lingered long after the official handshake and photograph. As the engagement progressed, Catherine began to understand how the protocol changes were affecting not just her own experience, but also the experiences of the people she was meant to serve. The facility staff, who had hoped to discuss specific challenges and seek royal support for funding initiatives, found themselves limited to scripted presentations that prevented meaningful dialogue. Families who had traveled considerable distances for the opportunity to share their stories and connect with someone who had become a symbol of hope in their struggles discovered that the rigid schedule left no room for the personal exchanges they had anticipated. The media coverage of the visit reflected these new constraints in ways that troubled Catherine deeply. Previously, photographers and journalists had been able to capture authentic moments of connection that conveyed the genuine emotion and impact of royal visits. Now, the controlled environment produced images that, while technically perfect, lacked the spontaneous warmth that had characterized Catherine's public appearances. The resulting articles focused more on protocol and procedure than on the important mental health issues that should have been the centerpiece of the coverage. Returning to Kensington Palace, Catherine felt a profound sense of frustration that she struggled to express appropriately within the royal system. She had entered her role with such enthusiasm for making a difference, armed with genuine passion for the causes she supported and a natural ability to connect with people across all backgrounds and circumstances. The new restrictions felt like barriers to the very purposes that had motivated her royal career, creating distance where she had always sought to build bridges. That afternoon brought a private meeting with representatives from several of her charitable patronages, organizations that had grown accustomed to Catherine's hands-on approach and personal involvement in their work. The conversation revealed how the protocol changes were creating challenges that extended far beyond individual visits and events. Charities had built their fundraising strategies and public awareness campaigns around Catherine's ability to provide authentic testimonials and personal endorsements based on her direct experience with their work. The new oversight requirements and scripted interactions threatened to undermine the genuine advocacy that had made her such an effective patron. James Wellington, director of a children's literacy program that Catherine had championed for several years, expressed particular concern about upcoming initiatives that depended on her personal involvement and authentic voice. The charity had planned a campaign featuring Catherine reading to children in various settings, but the new protocols required all content to be pre-approved and professionally produced, eliminating the natural, unscripted quality that had made previous collaborations so successful. The impact on fundraising and volunteer recruitment could be significant, potentially affecting thousands of children who relied on the program services. Catherine listened to these concerns with growing awareness of how her protocol restrictions created ripple effects throughout the charitable sector and the communities these organizations served. Her role as a royal patron had never been merely ceremonial. It had involved genuine partnership, active collaboration, and personal investment in achieving measurable outcomes. The new constraints threatened to reduce her involvement to symbolic appearances that might satisfy security requirements, but could fail to deliver the substantive support that charities needed to fulfill their missions. The conversation with charity representatives also revealed how the protocol changes were affecting public perception of the royal family's commitment to social issues. Catherine's reputation had been built on accessibility, authenticity, and genuine engagement with the causes she supported. Media coverage and public commentary were beginning to reflect disappointment with what appeared to be a retreat from the hands-on approach that had distinguished Catherine's royal work. The gap between public expectations and protocol realities was creating communication challenges that no amount of professional media management could fully address. Later that evening, Catherine sat in her private study reviewing correspondence from the public, letters that had always provided her with insights into how her work was being received and what issues mattered most to the people she served. The recent letters reflected confusion and disappointment about the changes in her public appearances. Elderly citizens who had followed her charitable work wrote about feeling disconnected from someone who had represented hope and understanding in their lives. Parents of children with mental health challenges expressed concern that reduced royal advocacy might mean decreased attention to issues that desperately needed continued support. One letter particularly moved Catherine, written by a single mother whose daughter had been inspired by Catherine's photography to pursue art therapy as a way of processing traumatic experiences. The mother wrote about how Catherine's personal sharing of family photographs and discussions of photography as emotional expression had provided her daughter with a new outlet for healing. The new restrictions on Catherine's photography and personal social media presence meant that this type of inspiring personal content would no longer be available to families who had found genuine help and encouragement in Catherine's authentic sharing. As Catherine prepared for bed that night, she reflected on a conversation she had had with William about their shared commitment to modernizing the monarchy while preserving its essential functions. They had always believed that royal duty in the modern era required finding innovative ways to remain relevant and connected to the lives of ordinary citizens. The protocol changes seemed to push in the opposite direction, creating greater distance and formality at a time when public institutions needed to demonstrate accessibility and understanding. The challenge that kept Catherine awake was how to maintain her effectiveness as an advocate and patron while working within constraints that seemed designed to limit the very qualities that had made her successful. She began to consider whether the protocols needed to be challenged or whether she needed to develop entirely new approaches to royal duty that could achieve the same goals through different methods. Perhaps the limitations would force creativity that could lead to innovations in royal engagement, but the transition period was proving more emotionally difficult than she had anticipated. Catherine's thoughts turned to her children and how the protocol changes would shape their understanding of royal duty and public service. George, Charlotte, and Louis were watching how their parents navigated these challenges, learning lessons about adaptation, resilience, and maintaining core values in the face of changing circumstances. The example Catherine set during this transition would influence their own approaches to royal responsibility and their understanding of what it meant to serve others while protecting institutional integrity. The complexities of modern royal life had never felt more apparent than they did during those quiet hours of reflection. Catherine understood that the monarchy existed within a delicate balance of tradition and innovation, accessibility and security, personal authenticity, and institutional responsibility. Finding her place within the new protocols would require all of her intelligence, creativity, and emotional strength, but she remained committed to discovering ways to serve effectively even within the constraints that now defined her royal role. 6 months had elapsed since the implementation of the new royal protocols, and Catherine had discovered that adaptation required not just acceptance, but active innovation in how she approached her role as Princess of Wales. The transformation had been more profound than she had initially anticipated, touching every aspect of her royal duties and forcing her to reimagine the fundamental nature of public service within constitutional monarchy. Standing in her private office on a crisp autumn morning, she reviewed the progress reports from her various charitable initiatives, noting both the challenges and unexpected opportunities that had emerged from operating within the new constraints. The most significant realization had been that meaningful impact could still be achieved, though through methods that required greater strategic thinking and collaboration with her support team. Catherine had learned to work more closely with her communication staff to develop content that maintained authenticity while meeting protocol requirements. Instead of spontaneous social media posts, she now participated in carefully planned digital campaigns that told deeper, more comprehensive stories about the causes she supported. While the personal immediacy had been lost, the resulting content often provided more substantial information and greater educational value than her previous informal shares. Her approach to charitable visits had evolved into a more structured, but potentially more effective model. Rather than brief, wide-ranging engagements that touched on many issues superficially, Catherine now concentrated on fewer, but more intensive partnerships with selected organizations. This deeper involvement allowed her to develop genuine expertise in specific areas and provide more meaningful support to causes that aligned with her interests and the monarchy's strategic objectives. The children's mental health initiatives that had always been close to her heart became the focus of a comprehensive, long-term campaign that included policy advocacy, research funding, and professional education components. The relationship with media had required the most significant adjustment, transforming from reactive engagement to proactive storytelling that served both public interest and institutional needs. Catherine worked with documentary filmmakers to create in-depth features about her charitable work that provided comprehensive coverage while maintaining appropriate boundaries. These longer-form projects allowed for more meaningful exploration of complex social issues and demonstrated impact in ways that brief news coverage had never achieved. The trade-off between immediate access and thoughtful, substantial content had proven beneficial for advancing her advocacy goals. Photography remained a passion that Catherine had learned to pursue within the new parameters, developing collaborations with professional photographers and arts organizations that expanded her skills while creating content that met protocol requirements. Her personal photography evolved into curated exhibitions and published collections that raised funds for her charitable causes while showcasing the artistic development that continued to provide her with personal fulfillment. The formal review process, initially viewed as restrictive, had actually pushed her to develop higher technical standards and more purposeful artistic vision. Catherine's children had adapted to the enhanced security measures and structured public appearances with greater resilience than she had expected. George, Charlotte, and Louis seemed to understand instinctively that their unique position required special considerations, and they had developed their own strategies for maintaining privacy while occasionally participating in family-oriented royal events. Their education about royal duty now included explicit discussions about balancing personal desires with institutional responsibilities, preparing them for their own future roles with greater awareness than previous generations had possessed. The most challenging aspect of adaptation had been learning to find fulfillment in structured rather than spontaneous interactions with the public. Catherine discovered that prearranged meetings with individuals and families, while lacking the surprise element of unplanned encounters, allowed for more meaningful exchanges and better preparation on both sides. People who met with her could prepare thoughtful questions and share more substantial information about their experiences, while Catherine could research their backgrounds and consider how best to offer support or advocacy. One particular success story emerged from her work with military families, where the new protocols had actually enhanced rather than hindered her effectiveness. By working more closely with military leadership and family support organizations, Catherine was able to develop comprehensive programs that addressed housing, education, mental health, and career transition issues in coordinated ways. The deeper partnerships that the protocols encouraged resulted in more systematic approaches to supporting military families rather than the piecemeal assistance that had characterized some of her earlier charitable work. The public's initial disappointment with the reduced accessibility had gradually given way to appreciation for the more substantial and sustained support that Catherine's new approach provided. Letters and feedback from charitable organizations indicated that while people missed the informal interactions, they valued the more consistent and professionally managed advocacy that emerged from the structured protocols. The monarchy's approval ratings, initially affected by perceptions of increased distance, had stabilized as the public recognized the continued commitment to service within new operational frameworks. Catherine's relationship with her staff had deepened significantly during the adaptation process, as she relied more heavily on their expertise and collaboration to achieve her goals within protocol constraints. The increased planning and coordination required for every engagement had fostered greater teamwork and shared responsibility for outcomes. Her private secretaries, communication staff, and security team became true partners in developing innovative approaches to royal duty rather than simply facilitators of her independent initiatives. The international dimension of Catherine's role had actually expanded under the new protocols, as structured engagements with foreign dignitaries and international organizations provided opportunities for substantial diplomatic and charitable collaboration. Video conferences and formal partnerships replaced some informal international travel, but often resulted in more productive working relationships and better defined outcomes. Catherine's advocacy for children's issues gained global reach through systematic partnerships with international organizations that appreciated the consistency and reliability of her structured approach. Personal growth had emerged as an unexpected benefit of operating within more defined parameters. Catherine discovered strengths in strategic thinking and long-term planning that had been less developed when her role emphasized reactive, immediate responses to opportunities and crises. The protocols had forced her to become more intentional about her choices, more thoughtful about priorities, and more systematic about measuring impact. These skills enhanced her effectiveness as a royal patron and prepared her for the greater responsibilities that would come with William's eventual accession to the throne. The marriage dynamics between Catherine and William had also evolved as they worked together to adapt their joint approach to royal duty within the new constraints. Their shared experience of protocol adjustment had strengthened their partnership and improved their collaboration on issues that affected both their individual roles and their joint initiatives. The structured approach to public engagement had actually provided more time for private family life, as the increased efficiency of planned events left greater space for personal relationships and individual interests. Looking toward the future, Catherine began to envision how the monarchy might continue to evolve in response to changing social, technological, and security environments. The protocol changes that had initially seemed restrictive now appeared to be part of a natural adaptation process that had always characterized successful institutions. Her experience suggested that royal duty in the modern era would require constant innovation and flexibility while maintaining core commitments to service and public welfare. As Catherine reviewed her calendar for the coming months, she felt a renewed sense of purpose and effectiveness. The protocols had forced her to become more focused, more strategic, and more collaborative in her approach to royal duty. While she occasionally missed the spontaneous interactions that had characterized her earlier royal career, she appreciated the deeper impact and greater sustainability of her current work. The constraints had become catalysts for innovation, pushing her to discover new ways of connecting with the public and advancing causes that mattered to her. The story of Catherine's adaptation to changing royal protocols represented more than personal adjustment. It reflected the broader evolution of constitutional monarchy in response to contemporary challenges. Her experience demonstrated that traditional institutions could maintain relevance and effectiveness through thoughtful adaptation that preserved essential functions while embracing new methods. The protocols that had initially threatened to limit her impact had ultimately provided structure for more significant and lasting contributions to the causes and communities she served. In the quiet moments of reflection that ended her days, Catherine found satisfaction in knowing that her role continued to make a meaningful difference in people's lives, even though the methods had changed. The essence of royal service, dedication to public welfare, support for charitable causes, and connection with citizens remained unchanged beneath the evolving procedures and protocols. She had learned to find fulfillment in adaptation itself, viewing the challenge of operating within new constraints as an opportunity to demonstrate the resilience and innovation that would define the monarchy's future.